everybody, Jewel back with another super cool astrology video, and I wanted to talk about the square between the moon and Saturn. What happens when we see this in a birth chart? So, the moon is our security. It is the natural ruler of the fourth house of where we come from, our roots, our mother, our early childhood conditioning, and what was going on in the home when we were absorbing all of that energy in our formative years. And it shows by sign and house and aspect what we do when we want to build or feel secure. What we do when we want to reorient or rebalance ourselves, because the moon is that part of us that represents our unconscious and our feelings specifically, and the style of how we feel. And the moon, right, it goes up and down, it ebbs and flows, tides go in and out. So things related to the moon and of the moon are not a stable thing, they're a changeable thing. And so when we want to balance ourselves, then you look at somebody's moon and how that's aspected and positioned, and it will tell you what they do in order to make themselves feel balanced or secure, fed, nurtured, safe, all those things. And Saturn is about practicality, limitation, tradition, what's always been. Both planets imply the past. And Saturn is also our, descriptive of our direction in life. It is the natural ruler of the 10th house of where we are going. So the moon is the natural ruler of the 4th of where we come from. The sun is the natural ruler of the 10th of where we're going. It is very much pointing north for us in the chart. The 10th house, Saturn, the things of Saturn, represents the father and expectations, fear, paranoia, related to loss or non-achievement or lack, poverty. Pluto's also poverty. And so people that have this particular square, because squares are aspects of tension, they're aspects of learning. It's something in the birth chart that's showing us there's a lesson here to be learned between these two planets. Something here doesn't come easy. We're getting in our way to some degree. Because the birth chart is a map of our early adaptations in the world, how we decided we were going to survive and what we did. And a lot of those things, meaning the hard aspects in our chart, don't necessarily work for us in the present time because they are things that are based on the past, and we don't live in the past, we live in present circumstances. And so the more that we get stuck in those conditioned behaviors that we took on, the more we can see that we're having the least amount of success in our relationships, or we're really getting in our way when it comes to our own success. So we have to rise above or transmute or work with or somehow make successful or connect, reconnect somehow, because there's big disconnections in our birth chart where we see hard aspects. We have to reconnect those things so we can have that inner happiness again, that inner wholeness, because all aspects represent a certain amount of fragmentation, where that fragmentation occurred and how we can then put that back together. So when we have the moon squared to Saturn, we have somebody who's generally too emotionally practical. There is a lot of attachment to outcomes. So they end up micromanaging their feelings and their inner lives, their domestic lives accordingly, because the moon represents our domestic environment. So typically, people with hard moon-Saturn aspects were raised in a fearful type of environment, or an environment that had a lot of stress or a lot of lack or a lot of fear related to money, or jobs coming and going, insecurity related to the needs being met, the material needs being met, and the amount of success typically that we saw as related to what is being provided for. So it is a myth that all hard moon Saturn aspects have a cold, unfeeling, unloving mother. That's not true. Many, many times people that have the conjunction or hard aspects had a very loving mother, but you have to consider the situation that they were absorbing at the time. Was the mother stressed? A lot of times it was a working mother, or there was a certain amount of separation in the early life from her. So the child who has this, the person who has this, their concept, their idea, their interpretation of what their early life was, had some amount of lack mentality going on here, or overwork mentality. Generally, that was transmitted via the mother, sometimes the grandmother, the female figure who was dominant in our life. And because this is Saturn involved, we also have the father involved as well, or the dominant parent on the other side of this particular square. So there was some amount of stress or fear or lack going on here in the early life. So that's very much why the child felt too responsible too early. This one is associated with the child growing up fast. We didn't really have a childhood because we felt like we had to get on the ball and start taking care of things. We had to start working early in life. And so it's one where people grow up as a result being extremely afraid of being impoverished or being homeless or being without or having a lack of success or a lack of money or a lack of support. A lack of security is what's really, really at the base of it, because you have to consider, what are these two planets about? And so they work tirelessly to make this not happen. And so a worried upbringing or a stressful upbringing or a fearful upbringing makes for a worried, stressful, fearing adult. So they are always planning on and expecting the worst with this particular square, because that was their very early experience, was disappointment. And they cut themselves off from possibilities because they base everything in the present on the past, because we have two planets here that are representing different elements of the past. And the lack or the fear, the paranoia that the parents instilled in them is really what determines their present and their future possibilities. So, Saturn and the moon are our past conditioning and limitation when you combine them. Emotional limitation is really what hard Saturn-moon contacts really mean. Pluto with the moon is kind of the same, but Pluto is transmutation, or change. Saturn is stagnation, limitation, tradition, staying the same, fear of the unknown. Pluto actually wants to go fearlessly into the unknown, so a little bit different there. So these people as children were literally emotionally starved, and that could have been physically too. Sometimes we can see that if we have the right houses involved here. And so what they did to compensate for that is they made themselves important. And they did that through becoming beneficial, through doing things, through working, through showing up as an overachiever, or the helper, or the cleaner, or the organizer, things that Saturn is about in the home. And, you know, the moon is what we do to soothe and rebalance ourselves and our habits of how we feel safe and secure. So they acted in ways to soothe themselves and to feel safe and secure in their early home environment that were completely inappropriate when it comes to the level of responsibility that they chose to take on and were allowed to take on, or maybe forced to take on, depending on the situation. So, you know, they started taking care of things early. They found a way to make themselves valuable through doing something, through showing up as successful in some way, or as the organizer, or as the overachiever. So, by working hard, overachieving, trying to gain safety through being recognized as the responsible one, who always remembers to turn the lights off, takes out the garbage, checks the gate, the child who cooks and cleans, so they can be appreciated. They're trying to gain your love through what they're doing. And so, when people with this particular square, with other hard moon Saturn aspects, especially in conjunction too, when they grow up, they cannot believe in the concept of unconditional love, because that was never a part of their experience when they were growing up, or probably ever has been in their life, because they are constantly living out the past through their behavior patterns. They cannot believe that somebody would love them for being them, not for doing, not for saving, not for having, not for being of benefit. They have this massive inferiority complex going on here. And they're trying to fix it by being successful, by being wealthy, by achieving stability through achieving, or through having, or through money. Because Saturn is our success. And they have to learn what unconditional love is and how to accept that, because they're not going to know how. They're going to fight that because they're going to have a belief in something completely different. Their early conditioning was based on conditions and expectations, limitations. So a concept of a free, flowing, unconditional, always there for you love is going to be something that, you know, they're not going to understand. And with this particular square, they fight you when you try to impart to them that there is a different way of understanding security and understanding how to get your needs met. You know, these are the kinds of people that are, you know, are like, yeah, okay, Gandhi, you know, I hear you, but your advice about, you know, turning inward and feelings and healing is going to end me up in the breadline, is what that's going to do. You're going to break me, is how they come at it. And so it's hard for them to understand any other way. And so I have people a lot of times asking in my videos, you know, I heard you say in a video that, you know, this isn't a Moon-Saturn problem, so, you know, it's more fixable. Or this isn't a Moon-Saturn problem, so, you know, this is something that we can probably, you know, address. Oh, boy, I know my lights have been doing that a lot lately. I like it. Sorry. It's on purpose. So, they are people that have to learn how to break out of this conditioning, this way of thinking, this expectation of conditions in order to get security met, needs met. And so Moon-Saturn takes time. Moon-Saturn aspects, you know, I say that they're hard to address because these two particular planets, what they are. This is the natural rulers of the 4th, 10th house axis. This is the past. This is our conditioning. This is not our Uranian parts of us that want to change, or the Pluto parts of us that are demanding to change. This is a part of us when we have hard moon Saturn aspects where we are stuck. And we have to blast our way out of this habit pattern because it is so deeply, deeply ingrained. So it comes from the past, meaning, and this is one that the behaviors implied can be passed down from generations that show up in this person with the square, not just the parents. This is like crunch time where you have to figure this out. So their success comes from a lack, or paranoia mentality is another part of this. So they actually never really become wealthy or successful or where they want to be in life because their attention is always on the lack or the loss or the potentials to lose or the fear or the paranoias, the reasons why they have to compensate for those things, why they have to work harder, why they have to save more, why they have to have more, why they have to be more. So our attention determines our experience. And if that's where your attention is, then that is what you are always going to see. And so these people tend to never have enough because they will always find a way to be insecure. It's not the stuff. It's not the success. It's not the CEO title. It's not the degree. It's not having your recipe show up in Red Book. It's a security issue. It is an inner issue. You are impoverished on the inside. And until that is addressed, the monetary security is not going to be what you want it to be. The success is not going to be what you want it to be. So you get what we, in the future, with this square, what you got. Meaning that they judge the present and the future based on the past. And so they don't allow themselves to trust life. They feel that they are the only ones who can earn or get or control the things that they need. And so this makes for somebody that, yes, is very responsible and is a very good earner, but they're doing it not out of healthy motivations. It's a lack mentality, so it creates more lack. Possibilities scare them because they only deal with what's known. They only deal with the past. So they shut out possibilities because that is scary to them. That is the unknown. What's known is what's already been done. What's known is our habits. What's known is what we've seen and experienced. It doesn't matter if that was good or bad. It doesn't matter with the square. It's what is. It's what is known. So this one is the aspect of the devil that you know might be better than the devil that you don't know. And so they tend to stay with the devil that they know. And they see it show up a lot in these cyclical experiences. So they have to learn to rise above the karma that they make. Sorry. That they make in this lifetime. Ultimately. And, sorry. Because Saturn is the lord of karma. It's known of that. It's known for that. Saturn is really the reason for living. It's our lessons that we learn in life. It's the hard lessons. It's the lessons that when we learn those, we really get to go on to a new level. Excuse me. So their attachment to outcomes has to be addressed. They have to come to a place where they can learn how to trust life to bring them what they need, instead of micromanaging that and squeezing that out of life, squeezing every penny out of everything, squeezing love out of their relationships. They have to create their own security through learning to trust life. And that has them rise above their karma, and they can start seeing some real miracles occur in their life, because they don't keep seeing the past. They start seeing possibilities come to fruition in their lives. They start seeing more options than they ever imagined could have existed before. If they can come out of this insecure belief system, they can start seeing a life that is secure. So they're working so hard to make one thing happen, but they're putting out that energy. It's like, it's very much like working more hours. You work way, way, way more hours so you can make more money. Well, the more hours you work, the more taxes, at least in America, the more taxes you actually pay on those hours. So it's really comes to, you're actually making less the more you work. So this is a lot like that, where the more they scrimp and save and are paranoid about their future based on what they've seen in the past, this is what happened to my parents, or this is what I saw in the past, or this is what happened to me in childhood. I have to prevent that. The more that they use those coping mechanisms that they learned back then in order to deal with the situation now, the less secure they will be, because they are recreating insecurity unconsciously. So it's really one where they have to release themselves from the enormous amount of responsibility that they have been living with for years and years, all their lives. They have to understand that they are not responsible for everything, and get themselves to a place where they are feeling free, and they are feeling that they can make their decisions based on present information, based on what they would like to see in the future, rather than what they have to avoid in the past, or else they're going to end up on the streets, they're going to end up starving, they're going to end up doing this. There's always a fear involved. So it's an interesting aspect to have, and it's one that you see very often in older and younger May-December kind of relationships, where they are either the older partner or the younger partner, because they have confidence issues when it comes to being able to meet the needs of an equal or a contemporary. So they find somebody that is either going to take care of them, and they can be the employee, or they find somebody that they can take care of and make the decisions, the executive decisions, because that's what Saturn is the executive. And they become the employer in that situation. That's comfortable to them. That's known. That's something that puts them in a more secure standing with their partners. So, really they're looking for a parent or to be a parent. A lot of times, and sometimes it can switch back and forth depending on who they're with. It can, they can do older and younger partners, or sometimes it's more mature partners, or more capable partners, or a partner that makes more money than them, or has more success than them. So this is really the aspect that Ebenezer Scrooge definitely had in his chart. If you really think about his character, he had a lot of money. He kept most of it because he was miserly. He was afraid of spending it. He lived in a very meager environment, ate meager food, lived among people who had a lot less than he did. That made him feel better about himself. That made him feel secure. He felt like he had a place of importance. He would call in his loans at the worst times because to him, if you really think about it, what's the psychology of calling in a loan at Christmas? Why would you do that? Because Christmas stimulates in you a fear of poverty, because it is something that is about abundance. It is something that is about giving. It's something that's about giving without the concept of having to receive. So it's something that, stimulated in him the need to cling, or the need to keep, or the need to get back. So, his character was one where he had everything he needed, but it was never going to be enough, and he was not happy. All of his decisions were based on his past run-ins, his past experiences, that someone had done this to him, that someone had done that to him, and he was so afraid that that was now going to happen, that he was clinging, preventing. And it was when he was able to let that go that he found happiness, when he was able to be generous, when he was able to be spontaneous, when he achieved a sense of freedom from his concept of what he had to be and had to do in order to be important to his community, to the people around him, to the few people that he actually personally knew. When he could let that go, that was when he became happy, when he became secure, because his security then comes from happiness. It comes from feeling good. It comes from understanding that you can take care of your own needs. With this square, we are looking for our environment to take care of our needs. Saturn, the 10th house, is an energy of the outside. The moon is the energy of the inside. It is our needs in order to feel secure, safe. And so when we're looking for that from an outside source, when we're looking for that from our environment, from our career, from our success, from other people's opinions of us and what that is, because this is also the reputation that precedes us in our image, is Saturn. When we're looking to bring that in from there, we are never going to be secure. So we can work and work and work. We can save and save and save. We can scrimp and scrimp and scrimp. We can shut people out. We can order people around. We can have to be the CEO all we want, but we're never going to get to that place of abundance, which is what we want. That's why you're behaving this way in the first place. So there has to be a death of the old ways. The 4th house is the house of endings, of ultimate endings. Saturn is one of the planets that we look to for death. And so there is a certain amount of having to kill off the old ways of thinking, the old ways of being. So there can be a rebirth into true success and true freedom and true security that comes from knowing that you can provide for your own needs. So I think that's interesting too, if you think about the story of Scrooge, that it was when, yeah, that's true, when the last ghost spirit visited him, and it was the ghost, or the one that where he ended up in the grave, or saw his headstone, and that was really what brought him to his senses, was that realization that death was coming, death was going to be there, and he had not loved or lived. And so that is also something that people with the square will often find, is that they don't get married or they don't find a relationship until they feel that their time is almost up, and then they're scrambling for that relationship, they're scrambling for that sense of security, because they've worked so long and tried to put everything in place that now it's time for that. And a lot of times their time passes them by because they have worked through their opportunities. And so this is an aspect that does require a certain amount of willing to trust and willing to surrender to what can be, to possibilities. And in that we find what we're really looking for, which is stability. So I hope this was helpful. If it was, please subscribe to my channel. You can find me on the internet at truthandaspectastrology.com. Yes, I do private consultation. You can find me on Facebook at Truth and Aspect Astrology. And I will be back very soon with more super cool videos.